Worms are truly ancient lineages of animals, with evolutionary histories stretching back hundreds of millions of years. Various worm-like groups have been inhabiting our world since long before the age of the dinosaurs, and the fact that they are still thriving today is a testament to just how remarkably successful they have been. As you may recall from our earlier What is a Worm? Video, the term worm isn't really a precise scientific classification. It doesn't designate a single group of organisms with a shared common ancestor. Instead, it's more of a descriptive label, referring to a general type of body plan. Essentially, anything that looks long, limbless, and wriggly can get called a worm. Because of this, when we talk about the origin of worms, we could be referring to any number of very different animal groups that just happen to share a vaguely worm-like form. In fact, you could even count some of the earliest members of the Ediacaran fauna as worm-like creatures, basal animals such as Dickinsonia, which bears some resemblance to a polychaete worm, or the recently named Icaria. Then there are the stranger inhabitants of the Cambrian Burgess Shale, such as Hallucigenia, which, though bizarre in appearance, is actually related to velvet worms. But to prevent this video from sprawling endlessly into all sorts of evolutionary complexities, we'll narrow our focus to what can be considered the three main groups of organisms that most people today recognize as worms: the annelids, which include earthworms, bristleworms, and leeches; the nematodes, often called roundworms; and the platyhelminthes, flatworms. We'll also take a quick look at a few other worm-like lineages at the end, ones with particularly intriguing fossil records. So let's begin with the annelids. The evolutionary history of annelids can be traced back more than 500 million years, with ancient relatives preserved in the renowned Middle Cambrian Burgess Shale of Canada, dated to about 508 million years ago. Among these fossils are species like Canadia spinosa and Berg Esokita sitigera, both widely regarded as early polychaete worms. However, the actual classification of polychaetes is notoriously complicated, as many researchers believe they are paraphyletic, meaning the group doesn't represent a single natural evolutionary lineage. There has also been debate over whether another peculiar Burgess Shale creature, Wiwaxia, was an annelid as well. Some paleontologists once proposed this, though more recent evidence increasingly suggests it was probably a mollusk instead. A major breakthrough came in 2018, when researchers described a new Burgess Shale annelid named Cuteniscolux. This fossil was so exquisitely preserved that it revealed not only the external anatomy but even possible traces of neural and vascular tissues, the first time such soft tissues had been identified in a fossil annelid. Even more importantly, it offered paleontologists fresh insights into how the annelid had evolved. The bristles, or setae, extended all the way to the animal's head segment, indicating that annelid heads likely formed through the specialization of what were once more generalized body segments. This discovery provided a remarkable new perspective on the developmental biology of annelid worms. For a long time, Canadia and Berg Esokita were thought to represent the oldest known annelid fossils. However, subsequent discoveries have pushed their origins further back. In 2008, a fossil named Phragmacita was described from Lower Cambrian rocks in Greenland, dated to around 518 million years ago. This worm had approximately 20 body segments, a straight gut, and bundles of bristles used to propel itself along the seafloor. It lacked jaws, but paleontologists placed it within the polychaetes, extending the lineage deeper into the Cambrian. Perhaps even more extraordinary is Yellingia, an ancient bilaterian animal described more recently, dating from between 551 and 539 million years ago during the late Ediacaran. Fossils of Yellingia from South China include preserved trackways, showing that this animal was capable of self-directed movement and decision-making. Whether Yellingia was an annelid or more closely related to panarthropods remains uncertain, but either way, it would almost certainly be called a worm if it were alive today. Its existence suggests that complex animals were present well before the Cambrian explosion, implying that this famous evolutionary event may not have been quite as sudden or dramatic as once believed. According to a 2007 study, it wasn't until the Ordovician period, around 480 million years ago, that polychaetannelids began to diversify significantly. Fossil annelid jaws first appear in the Ordovician record, suggesting this is when the crown group originated. Oligochaetes, the group that includes familiar earthworms, may have originated in the Mesozoic era, though there is disputed evidence suggesting an earlier origin. All of this shows that annelids have a truly fascinating evolutionary history. Yet, as with so many aspects of paleontology, much remains uncertain, and more fossils and studies will be needed before scientists can confidently map out the earliest origins of this diverse worm lineage. Nematodes form another extraordinarily ancient lineage of worms, and they are one of the most remarkable phyla of animals. In fact, you could easily make an entire video on nematodes alone. These creatures are found virtually everywhere, living in soil, water, plants, animals, and even inside humans. It's been estimated that there are at least 40,000 described species of nematodes, though the true number is likely far higher. They are among the most numerically abundant animals on the planet. One 2019 study calculated that there are roughly 4.410 nematodes inhabiting the topsoil of Earth, an almost unimaginable number. Clearly, nematodes are a staggeringly successful group, but when did they first evolve? That question is tricky, since most nematodes are tiny, soft-bodied, and microscopic, making them extremely difficult to preserve in the fossil record. There are exceptions, such as the giant nematode species that can grow over 13 meters long and parasitize sperm whales, but those are rare. Even so, paleontologists have uncovered some remarkable fossil evidence of nematodes. Exquisitely preserved specimens have been found trapped in amber from the Cenozoic era, but it's the older fossils that provide real insight into their evolutionary origins. Currently, the oldest known nematode body fossils come from Scotland, dating to the early Devonian period about 396 million years ago. These fossils were found inside the tissues of a prehistoric plant, preserved alongside clusters of eggs, juveniles, and adults, showing that parasitic relationships between nematodes and plants stretch back hundreds of millions of years. However, there is even older indirect evidence. In early Ordovician rocks from China, around 470 million years old, researchers discovered tiny cylindrical burrows in marine sediments. These appear to have been formed by nematodes, extending their fossil record by more than 70 million years, going further back still. Fossils from the extraordinary Chengjiang biota of China, dated to the early Cambrian around 518 million years ago, represent members of a related phylum called Nematomorpha, the horsehair worms. Their presence suggests that nematodes themselves likely already existed at that time, and perhaps even earlier. Indeed, George Poyner, a leading nematode expert, has proposed that nematodes may date back as far as 1 billion years. If true, they would be among the earliest animal lineages on Earth, though so far, no fossils exist to confirm such an ancient origin. Still, it's clear that nematodes have a long and fascinating history, one that reflects just how resilient and adaptable these worms have always been. Now let's move on to the Platyhelminthes, the flatworms, which include tapeworms. This lineage also stretches far back into deep time. One of the oldest and most striking fossil records comes from a shark coprolite or fossilized feces from the Permian period. Inside it, paleontologists identified 93 small, smooth structures interpreted as tapeworm eggs. Incredibly, one of the eggs even appears to contain a developing larva. The arrangement and morphology of the eggs strongly suggest they were laid by an ancient cestode, the group that includes modern tapeworms. This provides direct evidence that flatworms were parasitizing vertebrates at least 270 million years ago. There is possible evidence of an even earlier origin. Fossil hook-like structures found in Devonian rocks of Latvia may have come from flatworms, as they resemble the hooks used by modern cestodes to attach to their hosts. These fossils were found associated with placoderm fish, hinting at a parasitic lifestyle. However, their exact classification is uncertain, and some scientists suggest they may have belonged to other groups of parasitic worms. Later fossils provide further insights. For example, a 40-million-year-old flatworm preserved in amber retains developing eggs inside its body cavity, offering a rare glimpse into its biology. Altogether, the Platyhelminthes clearly represent another ancient, successful worm lineage, and it is almost certain that even older fossils will eventually be discovered. But as we've already seen, worm is a loose term, and many other worm-like groups have left fascinating traces in the fossil record. Among these are the priapulids, often nicknamed penis worms for obvious reasons. These marine animals have a particularly strong Cambrian record, with genera such as Otoya from the Burgess Shale well known to paleontologists. However, the exact evolutionary relationships of priapulids and their relatives remain complex and debated. Then there are the onychophorans or velvet worms. Today, they live in humid terrestrial environments, but their fossil relatives paint a very different picture. Strange Cambrian creatures like Halcyogenia from the Burgess Shale and others such as Microdictyon and Possipodia from China are thought to belong to the stem lineage of velvet worms, though their classification is still uncertain and often controversial. So what we have is a broad and diverse collection of animals, different lineages, united not by close evolutionary ties but by a shared worm-like appearance. And so we arrive at the bigger picture, the origins of at least some of the many creatures we call worms. Researching this subject has been a fascinating journey in itself. I'll admit, the ancient evolution of worms was something I hadn't thought much about before diving into the fossil evidence, but the deeper I went, the more astonishing the story became. What at first might seem like humble, unremarkable creatures actually possess evolutionary histories stretching back over 500 million years. And the more we study them, the more we realize that worms have played crucial roles in shaping ecosystems, evolutionary pathways, and even our understanding of the earliest complex life. From Eulingia crawling across the Ediacaran seafloor, to Cutaniscolax revealing how the heads of annelids developed, to tapeworm eggs hidden inside Permian shark coprolites, the fossil record of worms continually reshapes how we think about the history of life on Earth. These lineages demonstrate not only survival and resilience, but also the profound ways in which even the simplest seeming organisms can influence evolutionary history. It's clear that worms are not just background characters in the story of life, they are essential to it. Their success, diversity, and persistence through time show us how adaptable life can be, and how much we still have to learn about the earliest chapters of animal evolution. I hope this exploration has conveyed some of that same fascination to you. It is a perfect reminder that even the most unassuming creatures, the ones we barely notice in daily life, can hold the keys to understanding the deepest origins of complex life on our planet. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help us keep exploring these incredible stories from natural history.